These people died in ways so bizarre, so unexplained, you'll think they were scenes from a movie, but every word is true. It was a quiet September afternoon in London, the kind where nothing feels out of the ordinary. But on Waterloo Bridge, something eerie unfolded. A man named Georgi Markov, a Bulgarian writer and vocal critic of his country's communist leadership, was walking to work at the BBC when he suddenly felt a sharp sting on the back of his leg. Just a brief pinch. He spun around. The man behind him fumbled with an umbrella, offered a quick apology, and disappeared into the crowd like nothing had happened. Markov thought little of it at first, but by nightfall he was running a severe fever. Within 3 days he was gone. Doctors were baffled. No signs of trauma, no immediate clues. But during the autopsy they found something horrifying. A tiny metal pellet lodged in his leg smaller than a grain of rice, drilled with pinhole-sized cavities, and packed with a deadly white powder. That powder was ricin. If the name sounds familiar, it should. Ricin gained pop culture notoriety thanks to Breaking Bad, where it became Walter White's go-to silent killer. But Markov's case wasn't fiction. This happened in real life decades earlier, and it was executed with terrifying precision. Clement Vallandigham was a defense attorney known for his dramatic courtroom flair, but in 1871 his dedication to proving a point turned fatal, and his case became one of the most ironic deaths in legal history. Vallandigham was defending a man accused of murder. The victim had been shot during a barroom scuffle, and the prosecution claimed it was intentional. Vallandigham didn't buy it. He argued that the victim had accidentally shot himself while drawing his pistol from a pocket. But words weren't enough. So, in front of colleagues at his hotel, Vallandigham grabbed a pistol to reenact the supposed accident to prove how the man could have triggered the shot on his own. In his enthusiasm to demonstrate the theory, he didn't realize the pistol he picked up was loaded. 1 second later, the shot went off. Vallandigham staggered, hit in the abdomen. The lawyer who aimed to prove a client's innocence had just accidentally shot himself in the same way he claimed the victim had. The wound turned critical. He died not long after. The kicker? His reenactment worked. The court was convinced by his theory, and the man he was defending was acquitted. The story feels almost scripted. A courtroom demonstration, a misjudged prop, and a final moment that turned the tide of justice. Vallandigham became a legal legend not just for his skills, but for how far he went to make a point. Literally. No TV show could write irony better than this. In Germany, the name Günther Stoll doesn't trigger headlines anymore, but it should. His case is one of Europe's strangest unsolved deaths, tangled with paranoia, symbols, and an ending that still has no explanation. Stoll was a food engineer living a quiet life in the early 1980s, but something was clearly bothering him. He often told his wife and friends that they were out to get him. No one could ever pin down who they were. He never explained, just vague warnings and growing anxiety. Then one night he jumped up from his chair and scribbled 6 letters on a scrap of paper. Yogtze. No one knows what it meant. A code? A license plate? A secret chemical formula? The paper was found later in his abandoned car. That same night, Stoll left home and was spotted hours later near a highway in a dazed state. Then, in the early morning, he was found naked and severely injured inside his crashed Volkswagen off the road, in a ditch. Oddly, his injuries didn't match the crash. It looked like he had been struck elsewhere and placed in the vehicle. He died before he could tell anyone what happened. To this day, the Yogtze case has no suspects, no motive, no resolution. Just that strange handwritten note and a man who seemed to know something was coming. Police couldn't tie the letters to anything concrete. Online sleuths have spent years trying to decode them, still nothing. It's a real-life riddle with the pacing of a psychological thriller. A man with invisible enemies, a mysterious message, and a death that feels like the final scene of a film, one that cuts to black just as the truth is about to be revealed. The Cecil Hotel in Los Angeles has long had a reputation, not the glamorous kind, more the kind whispered about on internet forums and whispered even more quietly by locals. But in one case, the building's dark aura became global news. Elisa Lam, a Canadian student visiting LA, checked into the hotel in 2013. She kept a blog, posted travel updates, and explored the city alone. But then she disappeared. For 2 weeks, no one knew where she had gone. Her belongings were still in the hotel. Her social media went silent. Then guests began complaining about the water, low pressure, strange color, and odd taste. Maintenance staff checked the rooftop water tanks. Inside one of them, they found Elisa's body. But what set this case apart, what turned it from tragedy to obsession, was a piece of surveillance footage released during the search. It shows Elisa in the hotel elevator acting unusually. She peeks into the hallway, presses multiple buttons, hides in the corner, then makes strange hand movements. At times, it looks like she's talking to someone. At others, it looks like she's hiding from something only she can see. There was no footage of how she got to the locked rooftop. No alarms went off. The hatch to the tank was reportedly closed. Online theories exploded. Paranormal explanations, secret experiments, even connections to a disease outbreak all speculated, nothing confirmed. Eventually, her death was ruled an accident, attributed to mental health issues and misadventure. But the elevator video continued to fuel speculation. It was eerie, unexplained, and just ambiguous enough to let the imagination run wild. The case became the subject of documentaries, internet deep dives, and millions of comments. It blurred the line between reality and digital myth. Because when you watch that footage, even knowing the official explanation, something still doesn't sit right. In the small Austrian town of Braunau am Inn, a man named Hans Steininger was known not just as the mayor, but as a local icon thanks to a beard that stretched more than 4.5 feet long. Yes, feet. This wasn't some modern hipster facial hair. This was a flowing, carefully groomed symbol of status. Most days, Steininger kept it neatly rolled and tucked into a leather pouch. But one day in 1567, during a sudden outbreak of fire in the town, he wasn't so careful. Rushing out into the streets to help evacuate citizens, he either forgot to roll up his beard or it came loose in the chaos. As he hurried down a staircase, he tripped on it and fell headfirst. The fall broke his neck. And just like that, the man who wore his beard like a crown died by it. What makes the story so surreal isn't just the accident, it's the visuals. A town leader, well-dressed, commanding, suddenly undone by a personal trademark. His beard had been admired for years. Now it was his undoing. To this day, Steininger's legendary beard is reportedly preserved and displayed in the town museum. Visitors can see the exact length of the beard that caused one of the strangest accidental deaths ever recorded. It's the kind of story that makes you wonder, how many other fashion statements throughout history have ended this dramatically? In Arizona's Sonoran Desert, towering saguaro cacti dominate the landscape. Some of them stand over 20 feet tall and can weigh thousands of pounds. They've stood silently for centuries, their spiny arms reaching into the sky like ancient sentinels. But for one man in the late 1980s, one of those giants fought back. David Grunman, a resident of Lake Pleasant, decided one afternoon to do some impromptu target practice. Armed with a shotgun, he and his roommate drove into the desert. There, Grunman spotted a large saguaro cactus and began shooting. The cactus was over 20 feet tall and likely over a century old. After a few blasts, the lower section weakened. Then, as Grunman fired again, a massive arm of the cactus broke loose and came crashing down directly on top of him. The plant crushed him instantly. Saguaro cacti might look stoic, but their sheer size makes them more dangerous than they appear. Cutting or damaging them is actually illegal in Arizona, not just to protect the ecosystem, but to prevent incidents exactly like this. Locals have referred to Grunman's death as an act of botanical karma. It sounds absurd, a man killed by a cactus, but it's real. Nature doesn't always strike back with lightning or wild animals. Sometimes it just lets gravity do the work. And sometimes what looks like a harmless plant is actually a 2,000-pound hazard waiting for the wrong shot. There's a phrase people throw around without thinking: "I laughed so hard I nearly died." For Alex Mitchell of England, that wasn't just a figure of speech, it became reality. In 1975, Mitchell was watching a British comedy show called The Goodies, known for its over-the-top physical gags and absurd scenarios. On this particular night, the sketch involved a bagpipe duel, slow-motion fights, and an incredibly awkward kilted character known as the Eki Thump. Mitchell found it hilarious. He laughed for 25 straight minutes. Then suddenly he slumped over on the couch. He never got up. The cause of death was later identified as heart failure. At the time, no one could explain what had triggered it until years later, when his granddaughter was diagnosed with a rare genetic condition affecting the heart's electrical signals. It turns out Alex likely had it too. The case became one of the most peculiar entries in medical history. Doctors actually noted death by laughter in their reports. And while that might sound like a cartoonish headline, it was all too real. It's rare, but not unheard of, extreme laughter can cause sudden spikes in heart rhythm, especially for those with underlying issues. Mitchell's widow even wrote to the show's creators to thank them. saying at least he died happy, doing something he loved. A strange, tragic, and bizarre footnote in TV history, one that reminds you comedy really can be killer. She wanted the perfect shot standing at the edge of the world, thousands of feet above the city, clouds swirling below. Her last post showed a smile, a peace sign, and no harness. Seconds later, she slipped. One misstep, and the city lights she loved were the last thing she saw. Authorities found her phone still recording. The post went viral. The fall no one ever saw, just the echo of silence. It happened without warning, and it happened in the one place no one ever expects: a bedroom. In a quiet neighborhood just outside Tampa, Florida, Jeff Bush was getting ready for bed when the earth simply opened up beneath him. No earthquake, no explosion, just a sudden thunderous roar and then nothing. A hole had swallowed the entire room. Family members in the house rushed in but found only a gaping pit where Jeff had been moments earlier. His brother tried to jump in to rescue him, but the ground kept collapsing, pulling everything deeper. By the time emergency crews arrived, the sinkhole was more than 20 feet wide and just as deep. They couldn't even see the bottom. No body was ever recovered. In fact, the hole was so unstable that the entire house had to be demolished, with the sinkhole still active underneath. One moment, Jeff was home. The next, he was gone, taken by the ground beneath his feet. Florida is known for sinkholes thanks to its porous limestone foundation. But this one was different. It appeared without warning, offered no second chances, and left behind only a void. It's one of the most chilling reminders that nature doesn't always knock before breaking through. Even now, nothing has been built on that spot. It remains fenced off, grass growing around the edges, as if the earth itself is still holding a secret one that no one's been able to dig back up. He was found lying neatly on Somerton Beach in South Australia, dressed in a suit, polished shoes, and a half-smoked cigarette resting on his collar. There was no wallet, no ID, and every label on his clothes had been carefully removed. No one recognized him. No one came forward. The year was 1948, and the mystery of the Somerton man had just begun. The autopsy revealed something strange. He was in peak physical condition, but his organs were in chaos. Doctors couldn't identify a clear cause of death. No wounds, no signs of struggle, just internal collapse. Some suspected poison, but no traces were ever found. And then things got weirder. Weeks later, investigators discovered a secret pocket sewn into the man's trousers. Inside was a tiny scrap of paper with 2 Persian words printed in elegant script: Tamam Shud. Translation? It is finished. The phrase matched the final page of a rare book of poetry, the Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam. That same book was eventually found in a stranger's car abandoned nearby, and in it, a scribbled code, random letters, some crossed out, some underlined, a phone number, a few names. None of it made sense. The phone number led to a local nurse who allegedly fainted when shown the man's face. She later denied knowing him. Decades passed, internet sleuths dug in, cryptographers tried breaking the code, theories bloomed: Cold War spy, jilted lover, runaway aristocrat. But the man's identity stayed locked. Until recently. In a breakthrough, genetic genealogy revealed his likely name: Carl Webb, an electrical engineer from Melbourne, missing from records for decades. But even now, the reason for his death and how he ended up on that beach remains a blank page. The code, still unsolved. The story, still unfinished. The Somerton man remains one of the most haunting unsolved puzzles of the 20th century, part tragedy, part riddle, and part ghost story in a well-tailored suit. June 1995. A woman checks into room 2805 of the Radisson Blue Plaza Hotel in Oslo, one of the tallest buildings in Norway. She gives the name Jennifer Fairgate, a Belgian national. But something feels off from the start. The address she gives doesn't exist. Her passport is fake, and she's traveling alone with almost no luggage. 3 days later, staff notice she hasn't checked out. They knock. No answer. They enter. She's lying on the bed, fully dressed, shot in the forehead. The gun is in her hand. The room is locked from the inside. No signs of forced entry. It looks like a suicide. At first, but then the inconsistencies pile up. There are no fingerprints on the gun, not even hers. Her clothes have had every tag removed. No ID, no purse, no wallet. Her suitcase contains 25 rounds of ammunition and a second magazine, but no toothbrush, no makeup, not even a single hairbrush. It's a setup that looks more like a scene from Jason Bourne than real life. Interpol couldn't match her fingerprints. No missing persons report matched her appearance. And Jennifer Fairgate? That name had never existed anywhere in any official record. Just a ghost in high heels and a black jacket. Decades later, journalists and investigators revisited the case. Some now believe she may have been an intelligence asset, a covert operative who either failed a mission or was silenced after one. Others think it was a clean professional hit, staged to look like a suicide. Despite advances in forensic tech, her identity still hasn't been confirmed. The hotel room has long since been cleaned and rebooked, but the story still lingers. A high-rise, a false identity, and a silent death that left no real answers, only questions sealed behind a luxury hotel door. Brazil, 1966. On a quiet hillside near Rio de Janeiro, a boy flying a kite stumbled upon a surreal scene. Two men lying side by side in matching formal suits, raincoats, and bizarre metal masks covering their eyes. No signs of struggle, no wounds, no weapons, just an open notebook with strange instructions. 1630, be at agreed place. 1830, ingest capsules. After effect, protect metals, await signal. The story only got weirder from there. The men were later identified as electronic technicians from a neighboring town. They had left days earlier, telling their families they were buying work equipment. Instead, they'd traveled miles with cash, tools, and 2 freshly purchased waterproof raincoats. No one knew why. Toxicology tests were inconclusive. Decomposition had already set in. But the notes suggested they believed they were about to witness something otherworldly. The capsules were never found. Some speculated they were trying to make contact with extraterrestrials. Others suggested it was a spiritual experiment gone wrong, a kind of modern alchemy. The masks, handmade, lead-lined, clearly meant to protect their vision. But from what? A blinding light? Radiation? No one ever figured that out. No suspects, no answers. Just 2 men lying side by side on a hill, waiting for a signal that never came. It started as a missing person case in the UK. Zygmunt Adamski, a 56-year-old coal miner, left his home in Yorkshire to run a few errands and vanished. Days later, his body was discovered on top of a coal pile at a nearby plant. But this wasn't a typical recovery. He had only been missing for 5 days, but his beard showed signs of growth that didn't match the timeline. His body was clean, his clothes were mostly dry, and a strange gel-like substance was smeared across burns on his neck and shoulders. The burns looked professionally dressed, not with bandages, but with deliberate care. The coroner called it one of the most baffling deaths he'd ever seen. There were no signs of a struggle, no clues about how he ended up on top of the coal heap, which was difficult to access without being seen. Some investigators began whispering the word no one wanted to say publicly: UFO. At the time, there were local reports of strange lights in the sky. Some claimed Adamski may have been abducted, treated, and returned, but something went wrong. The burns didn't match any known industrial source, and the substance used to treat them was never identified. Officially, the case was closed as an unexplained death, but unofficially, it became part of Britain's deep catalog of unexplained encounters, a man who disappeared without trace, then reappeared like a character dropped into a story that didn't belong to him. A duffel bag, locked from the outside, a bathtub in an upscale London apartment. No fingerprints on the lock, no signs of forced entry, and no one else in the room. Inside the bag? The body of Gareth Williams, a brilliant British codebreaker working for the government's intelligence division. The year was 2010. Williams had worked with both MI6 and GCHQ and was known for his mathematical skills and cryptography expertise. But when his body was discovered, the questions far outnumbered the facts. Experts tried recreating the scene. Could someone zip themselves into a duffel bag, padlock it from the outside, and leave no trace? No one could replicate it. Forensic scientists were baffled. Even escape artists failed to perform it. There were whispers that the case was linked to his work. Williams had access to highly classified material, some of it reportedly involving international surveillance and cyber operations. Others speculated about a personal vendetta, or even a warning. Police ruled it as probably an accident, but few believe that. His apartment showed no signs of struggle, yet his phone had been wiped clean. His computer history erased. Everything about the scene felt scrubbed. It's the kind of mystery that wouldn't feel out of place in a Bourne movie or a spy thriller. But this wasn't fiction. Gareth Williams was real, and what happened to him remains one of modern Britain's most chilling unsolved cases. In the depths of the Russian Ural Mountains, a group of 9 experienced hikers set out in the winter of 1959 for what should have been a challenging but routine expedition. Led by Igor Dyatlov, the team included skilled skiers and mountaineers. They never returned. Weeks later, rescuers found their tent slashed open from the inside. Their boots, gear, and coats had been left behind. Footprints led away into the snow, some barefoot. The first bodies were found not far from the tent, wearing only underwear and socks. Others turned up weeks later, scattered through the forest with injuries that defied logic. One had a fractured skull. Another had broken ribs and missing eyes. One woman was found without her tongue. There were no signs of an avalanche, no animal tracks. The levels of radiation on some of the clothing only made things more confusing. Soviet investigators at the time couldn't explain it. They simply stated the group died from a compelling natural force. Over the years, theories exploded. Secret military experiments, paranoia-induced madness, infrasound vibrations causing panic. Even a Yeti made the list, and yes, that theory was mentioned in actual Soviet records. More recent investigations suggested a rare type of avalanche could have caused the panic. But that still doesn't explain the bizarre injuries or the strange decisions the hikers made in their final hours. Whatever happened that night remains buried under snow, silence, and decades of speculation. No one survived to tell the story. Just a torn tent, strange wounds, and a place now known by a name that carries weight far beyond a map, Dyatlov Pass. That's about it. Whose mysterious death can you explain? Write your guesses in the comments, and don't forget to check out our other videos.